I guess.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see you again. This is our second class of many. And we were going to begin with a couple of the prayers. I assume, Sheila, you have put up on the screen there?
Everybody see that?
Yeah. So if you could scroll up Sangye Chirang Sukhi Chognamla is just, yeah, there we go. So try to think of the meaning of these words as we recite them. We'll recite once in Tibetan the first verse, which is, as I recall, is composed by Atisha when he came to Tibet, which is almost all of the Gelugpa teachings always recited first, not just Gelugpa, but many of the Tibetan Buddhist teachings. We'll recite first in Tibetan once and then twice in English. Sangye Churang Sukhi Chognam La Changju Bardu Dagni Kyapsuchi Dagi Chunyen Gipe Sognam Ki Drola Penchir Sangye Drupa Sho. Shankar, you'll have to correct that and send the correction to.
Yes, I'm sorry, I forgot last week.
The third line is Dagi Chunen, which Chunen means listening to the Dharma. It should be Gipe Sognam. There's no so after the sog. Sognam Gi, not Jim. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the collections I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. Here it says sentient beings. It should be, and there's no all, but then short mandala. Sashi-poki Chukching Meto Tramri Rablingji Nidegen Padi Sangye Shingu Mikte Uwargi Drokunam Dag Shingla Chupasho. And then the next verse, if you keep the mudra of offering the mandala, you keep that, and then the next verse is a request for the teachings. O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please release a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. So that last little phrase, that's all we'll do today. That last little phrase, Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Idam means this. In Sanskrit, the order of the words is not as specified as in English. So you can say this, Idam means this, Guru means Guru, obviously, teacher. Ratna means precious. Mandalakam, I think nominative case of mandala. Niryatayami means I offer. So I offer this mandala, this precious mandala, to the Guru. Okay. So Good to see many of you again today. We have a couple of extra people. Maybe some people have already fatigued out. By the way, the recording on YouTube appeared on Wednesday evening about 8 p.m. If you happen to miss a class in the future, apparently it usually takes whoever is doing that a couple of days to get it up. So you keep that in mind, Wednesday evening. But if you've missed one, you can send an email to perhaps Sheila or to Shanka or to me. And sometimes the Zoom recording is available maybe Tuesday, maybe a day earlier, or maybe Monday. So there are two recordings. There's one that's Zoom, where you need the specific link and a passcode. And there's one up on YouTube where there'll be all of them successively up there. So before I begin, are there any questions from last time? Anything that's, David missed the name of the book that you mentioned by Jeffrey Hopkins. It is called Compassion in Tibetan Buddhism. Compassion in Tibetan Buddhism. It is not called Cultivating Compassion. That's a different book. Okay. Good morning, Paul. We missed you last time. Okay, good to see you.
I got that book. The rest of the title is Meditations of a Tantric Abbot. And then there's his name,
Right.
Churlakin's Way of Compassion, Khapa.
Yeah, thank you. So we are going to continue from where we were last time. Those of you who may have missed, you can find the recording of last week's teaching on YouTube under Shantideva Center, Churinoff, Illuminating the Intent, if you type those words in. So we got up to the meaning of the title, which Shanka reminds me in the hard copy is again, what page, Shanka? The meaning of the title?
Page 33, end of second paragraph.
Okay, meaning of the title.
Oh, the meaning of the title is on page 32. Yes, 32.
Okay, so I'm just going to go over that a little bit. So it says in Sanskrit, one of the four great languages that existed in India. So I mentioned last time there were various languages that existed in India at the time. Some of them are renowned, like Pali and Sanskrit, that the Buddhist teachings were mainly preserved in. Pali is a little bit like a colloquial version of Sanskrit. Maybe the Pali purists wouldn't like that if I say it's kind of colloquial. It's a little bit like Romano. Do you know what Romano is? Like in Latin, is that right, Diana? You know, you're Italian. Romano, you know, the colloquial language when Latin was being spoken by the upper classes, you know, not quite the same grammatical precision that was necessary. So one of the four great languages that existed in India, namely Sanskrit, in that language, the title of this text, this treatise, is the Madhyamaka Avatara. Madhyamaka Avatara. So there's a long A there. Madhyamaka Avatara, entering into the middle way, or as Jeffrey translates it, Jeffrey Hopkins translates it, supplement to the middle way. Here, the middle way that is being entered into, you know, what middle way? That means what madhyama are you entering into? What middle way are you entering into? It's not the philosophy in general. You might think that, like an entry into the middle way philosophy. It's actually the middle way that's being referred to is the text by Nagarjuna called Fundamental Wisdom, Mula Prajna. It goes by other kinds of names also. Paul, what are the other, in Sanskrit, what are the other names? Mula Prajna and
It's the Mula Madhyamaka, Prajna Nama Mula Madhyamaka Karaka. It's the
right.
full title.
So the word karaka at the end, so just if you say Mula Prajna, one can understand, but as Paul said, the karaka at the end means stanzas or verses. So that's a text that's just written in verse form. Nagarjuna did not, according to the Tibetans, did not write an auto commentary to that. So that's what's being called here fundamental wisdom, or as Chandrakirti refers to it often, the middle way, the Madhyama. Here, the middle way that is being entered into is found in the statement, to enter the middle way treatise, namely the treatise on the middle way that was composed by Nagarjuna. This in turn should be taken to mean fundamental wisdom. And in your text, if you look at that note 52, it says, Sawe Sherab. This is how Tibetans customarily refer to Nagarjuna's fundamental verses on the middle way, even though he leaves out the word karika, meaning verses. For instance, fundamental wisdom is cited as the authority in the commentary on this text. That is to say, Chandrakirti is the person who's Lama Tsongkhapa is referring to when he says the commentary on this text. Chandrakirti frequently writes in the middle, quote, in the middle way. Therefore, this term should not be taken to refer to some other treatise on the middle way or to some other meaning of the term middle way. Then a text called The Lamp of Wisdom by Bhava Viveka, in that, drawing on the etymology of the roots of the word middle way, explains that both the treatise on the middle way as well as the middle way philosophy can be referred to as the middle way, but in this particular context, when you're talking about Chandrakirti's commentary called Entering into the Middle Way, what he's referring to is entering into that particular treatise by Nagarjuna. So although middle way appears here in the title, it must be understood as referring to the treatise on the middle way. What then is the manner in which this treatise enters fundamental wisdom, enters the text called the middle way? Here, some, which Jeffrey points out, and in the commentary is referring to Jaya Ananda or Jayananda, which the Tibetans sometimes say Zayananda. Some assert, someone, in particular Jayananda, asserts that Nagarjuna's treatise on the natures, that in Nagarjuna's treatise, the natures of the conventional and the ultimate truths have not been expounded extensively. Whereas here, meaning in, because Jayananda was writing a commentary on Chandrakirti's Madhyamaka, here, these have been presented extensively. So this text enters into that treatise, or maybe Jayananda would like to say it supplements that. The word avatara, there's some scholarly debate about what's the actual meaning here, whether it means it supplements the fundamental wisdom or it enters into the fundamental wisdom. So that is not a good explanation. It says, with respect, Lama Tsongkhapa says, with respect to the varieties of reasoning for establishing suchness, which means the various reasonings that prove emptiness. When we say establishing suchness, like when we talked about the 4-point analysis, that was a reasoning that would establish emptiness or establishing suchness. With respect to the varieties of reasoning for establishing suchness, however, fundamental wisdom is far more extensive than Madhyamaka Vatara, entering the middle way. It has many chapters, establishing the emptiness of the Four Noble Truths, the Two Truths, the three times, coming and going, all sorts of things. And if you listen to, if you have a chance of listening to some recordings of the Dalai Lama's teachings on the fundamental wisdom, I think he sometimes he accentuates, he sort of advises certain chapters to read. You can see the various topics that are mentioned. So there are many kinds of reasoning. So with respect to the varieties of reasoning for establishing suchness, however, fundamental wisdom is far more extensive than the reasonings that are set forth in Madhyamaka Vatara. So I, meaning Lama Tsong Khapa, do not see this as a good explanation. As for our own position, that means Lama Tsong Khapa's position, this work enters fundamental wisdom or supplements fundamental wisdom in two ways. It enters from the perspective of the profound aspect of the path and enters from the perspective of the vast aspect. So remember what this means. When we talk about the teachings of the Buddha, one way of summarizing them all is when you talk about the profound and the vast, or another way of saying vast is extensive. So when we talk about profound, that's referring to the wisdom aspect of the teachings, and usually is referring to ultimate truth. When you talk about the extensive or the vast, that's talking about the varieties of phenomena that appear to us. So that's talking about conventional truths. So conventional truths like trees and cars and, coffee cups and so forth, and your own self and presidents and countries and everything like that appear to us, that we think about, all of those are conventional truths. They are not ultimate truths. They all are empty of inherent existence. So they all have a profound aspect that are dealt with by the profound teachings, and they have conventional aspect that is dealt with by the vast or extensive teachings. The vast or extensive teachings also talk about the practice of the Bodhisattvas' perfections, the extensive deeds of the Bodhisattvas, and so forth. In relation to the first, what is the first? That is perspective of the profound aspect of the path. The commentary states, that means Madhyamaka Vatara states, this tradition is unique. So must and Lama Tsong Khapa adds, so must the learned ones ascertain. Actually, that whole quote is from Chandrakirti. So Hopkins translates that on page 97, if you happen to have that book. With respect to the first, Chandrakirti says that he composed the supplement in order to indicate that the meaning of the middle way, which he ascertained, is not shared with other Madhyamikas, specifically the Svatantrikas, in the auto commentary to verses 1152 and 1153. So this is at the end of the text, the 11th chapter. We talk about each of the 10 bhumis of the Bodhisattvas. They each have a chapter, and in the 11th chapter, at the end, it says, Chandrakirti says, the wise should ascertain that this tradition is uncommon, or as Thupten Jinpa here says unique to Mung Mayimba. So how does it, the Madhyamaka Vatara, how does it enter into or supplement the fundamental wisdom? It supplements it from one point of view, from the profound point of view, in that it is explaining the unique features of the Madhyamaka. Also, not realizing this, they abandon this profound teaching. Thus, to present without error the truth of the treatise, I have composed this work entering into the middle way. So these are the words of Chandrakirti at the end of the text. You won't find it at the beginning of the Madhyamaka Vatara. So Chandrakirti states that he composed the Madhyamaka Vatara to show that the meaning of the treatise on the middle way, fundamental wisdom, as established by him, what Chandrakirti understood, that which he established the meaning of the treatise on the middle way, is distinctive compared to other middle way proponents. Other middle way proponents would mean particularly the Svatantrika. When those of you who studied tenets remember that in the Madhyamaka schools, there are two, the Svatantrika and the Prasangika, and the Svatantrika even has some sub-schools. So he shows the meaning of the fundamental wisdom is established by Chandrakirti himself as distinctive compared to other middle way proponents, mainly the Svatantrika, and to strengthen the conviction that the meaning of the treatise cannot be explained in conformity with the mind-only school or the consciousness-only standpoint. So, when we talk about the mind-only school, what that is? Violet, do you know what the mind-only school is? Chittamatra? Not sure. Okay. So of the various philosophical schools that are recognized, two of the main schools are of the Hinayana variety that are mainly explaining how to achieve nirvana for oneself. Those are what are called the Vaibhashika and the Sautrantaka. The two Mahayana philosophical schools are called the Chittamatra and the Madhyamaka. So another way of calling Chittamatra is Vijnapti Matra. Matra means only, right? The postscript. What do you call it? When you add to the end of a word, what is that called? Not postscript. Who can help me with grammar?
Suffix.
Suffix. The suffix matra means only or mere. So Vijnapti Matra essentially is another name for Chitta Matra. Chitta means mind, Vijnapti means consciousness, although they are used slightly different to explain, to be naming varieties of the Chittamatra that were explained by Asanga and others. Okay, so but it's meaning the same thing. So it's also to strengthen the conviction that the meaning of fundamental wisdom by Nagarjuna cannot be explained in conformity with the Chittamatra standpoint or the consciousness only Vijnapti Matra standpoint. In the text that Chandrakirti wrote called Clear Words, in his Clear Words, Prasanapada, Chandrakirti says that insofar as the nature of dependent designation is concerned, this should be understood from entering the middle way. So what is this talking about? Chandrakirti wrote two main commentaries to well, two commentaries, I'm saying main commentaries, wrote two commentaries to on Madhyamaka Vatara, two commentaries on fundamental wisdom. One he composed that we're dealing with here, Madhyamaka Vatara, entering into the middle way, supplementing the middle way. That is what's called a meaning commentary. So he did, in that commentary, Chandrakirti did not comment on every verse of fundamental wisdom, because there are many chapters. Each chapter has varying number of verses explaining that topic. The meaning commentary that he wrote, the Madhyamaka Vatara, did not comment on all of the verses. In his worded commentary, so you could say there are two kinds of commentaries. There are meaning commentaries and word commentaries. Meaning commentaries are trying to explain the general meaning of something without going into the division of the individual words or verses. Word commentaries are commentaries that explain sometimes every single word, as tiresome as that might seem, every single verse. And so in the text that Chandrakirti wrote called Prasanapada, the clear words, or clearly worded, sometimes people translate it, Chandrakirti says that insofar as the nature of dependent designation is concerned, let me see how Jeffrey translates this here. So Chandrakirti's clear words, Prasanapada, says, the mode of dependent designation can be known from my supplement. So Jimpa translates that here as, Chandrakirti says that insofar as the nature of dependent designation is concerned, this should be understood from entering the middle way. Whereas Jeffrey adds the term my. So Chandrakirti wrote both texts. He wrote Madhyamaka Vatara and Prasanapada. So he says that this subtle understanding of dependent designation. How does Jimpa translate it here? Dependent designation, yeah, same thing. That can be known from the Madhyamaka Vatara. So it supplements the fundamental wisdom in talking about how phenomena are imputed or designated, you could say, dependently, dependent imputation or dependent designation. So this is one of the ways that the Madhyamaka Vatara supplements the fundamental wisdom. Furthermore, the refutation of the consciousness-only standpoint, or the mind-only standpoint system, is not extensive in either fundamental wisdom or clear words, but is extensive here. So this is an important point. The Madhyamaka Vatara, being much later than fundamental wisdom, at a time when Asanga had propagated the mind-only teachings or consciousness-only teachings, explaining the Madhyamaka from that point of view, explaining the Mahayana from that point of view. Fundamental wisdom didn't, the mind-only school was not renowned at the time when Nagarjuna wrote fundamental wisdom, so there was no need for him to refute that. Also, when Chandrakirti wrote his word commentary, the Prasanapada, because it was talking about the verses of fundamental wisdom, it didn't get into refuting the Chittamatra system. But here, furthermore, the refutation of the consciousness-only standpoint is not extensive in either fundamental wisdom or clear words, but is extensive here. So there are some chapters in the Madhyamaka Vatara that are, sections that extensively refute the Chittamatra point of view, explaining it from what the Buddha meant when he gave those particular kind of teachings on Chittamatra from the Prasangika point of view. Therefore, ascertaining excellently the meaning of fundamental wisdom and appreciating these two objectives, one, providing a unique interpretation of Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom compared to other commentators. So this is mainly from the point of view of other Madhyamakas, right? Bhava Viveka and so forth, and offering an extensive refutation of the consciousness only or mind only tradition on the basis of that treatise. These two together constitute one way in which this text enters the middle way. Okay. Okay. What do you think? I'm going to look at some faces here. Mary Ellen, what are you thinking? Too complicated? Too many words?
No, I think that there are some people in the room that might benefit from an explanation of how the mind-only school posits things existing that's different from the way that we learn in the Prasangika tradition, because I know some people may not have had that yet.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that is going to be gone into extensively. I'm not mentioning it right now, but in general, so when they talk about mind only, there are quotations from the Buddhist, some of the Buddhist discourses, some sutras, when the Buddha said, all three worlds are mind only. All the three realms, let's say, are mind only. So in the other kinds of quotations about mind only, the way that it was drawn out by a Sangha, and also Vasubandhu, who was his brother, who wrote a lot about the Chittamatra school, was that phenomena do not exist as external objects the way that they appear. Right now I'm looking at my air purifier in front of me. There looks like a big rectangular blob that takes in the air and takes out the dust and so forth. It looks like an object that's external to my mind. Whereas there's some things we know that are internal to my mind, like dream objects, right? So the Chittamatra school said that the appearance of objects as being external to the mind is an illusion, that they are, in essence, of the nature of the mind. They are mere mind. That it's sort of like the same way that you might dream about someone or something. You might have a dream of winning the lottery or eating a great hamburger or something like that. And when you wake up, you say, "Oh, that was just a dream. That was merely a dream." That's the sense of matra, merely mind. There was not an actual hamburger that you ate when you woke up. You didn't win the lottery. It was, quote, just a dream, right? So that's one sense of what the Chittamatra or Vijnapti Matra, consciousness only or mind only school is talking about, that phenomena don't exist as external objects the way that they appear and the way that we ordinarily accept. From the Prasangika point of view, generally from the Madhyamaka point of view, although there's some subsects of the Madhyamaka that accept something like Chittamatra, from the Prasangika point of view, external objects do exist. They are external to your mind. But the explanation of that is very subtle, and that will come, in those sections that he says, the Madhyamaka Vatara explains this refutation of the Chittamatra extensively. So that will come more then, okay? Entering the middle way from the perspective of the vast. So the first section we just talked about was how it entered into the profound. So it entered into the profound and giving, how did we say here? It's distinctive from other explanations of the profound, meaning the other sort of the Svatantrika and other Madhyamaka views. And it also is refutes the consciousness only or mind only school. Entering in the middle way from the perspective of the vast or extensive side of the path is as follows. In accordance with the tradition of Nagarjuna, noble Nagarjuna, abiding in the two vehicles, meaning the Hinayana and Hinayana, is not distinguished based on whether one possesses wisdom realizing the utterly profound truth of suchness. So what is this talking about? In Nagarjuna's tradition, according to Chandrakirti, especially according to Lama Tsongkhapa's interpretation of Chandrakirti, whether one is a Hinayanist or a Mahayanist does not depend upon whether one realizes emptiness. Now, according to the Hinayana schools, they would say, the Hinayana schools would say the Vaibhashika and the Sautrantika would say that a Hinayana practitioner, or the Sravikas or Pratika Buddhas, do not realize emptiness, the emptiness of phenomena. They realize selflessness of persons, and in sort of an indirect way, you could say they have a kind of understanding of emptiness in that phenomena are empty of being objects of use of a self-supporting, substantially existent person. So according to the tradition of the system of Nagarjuna, abiding in the Hinayana or Mahayana is not distinguished based on whether one possesses wisdom realizing the utterly profound truth of suchness. Furthermore, although no distinctive features of the vast path of Mahayana, besides the dimension of the profound, are presented in fundamental wisdom, that work was composed from the Mahayana point of view within the division of Mahayana and Hinayana. Now, what's that talking about? Although no distinctive features of the vast path of the Mahayana, besides the dimension of the profound, are presented in fundamental wisdom, that work was composed from the Mahayana standpoint within the division of Mahayana and Hinayana. So what distinctive features of the vast path is he talking about here that are not mentioned in fundamental wisdom? Fundamental wisdom doesn't talk about so much about the Bodhisattva's activities, the 6 perfections, other than taking them as objects of analysis. You analyze the 6 perfections and so forth. He doesn't talk about how the Bodhisattva practices charity, how the Bodhisattva practices morality, how the Bodhisattva practices patience, enthusiastic perseverance, concentration, or wisdom. Nagarjuna talked about those subjects in other texts, not in fundamental wisdom. He talked about them especially in the precious garland, Tibetan say Rinchen Tengwa. And that text is quoted very much in the Madhyamaka Vatara, the precious garland. So furthermore, although no distinctive features of the vast path of the Mahayana, besides the dimension of the profound, are presented in fundamental wisdom, that work was composed from the Mahayana standpoint within the division of Mahayana and Hinayana. He's just like saying that. Why? This is because the extensive presentation of the selflessness of phenomena by a profuse variety of reasoning. How does Jeffrey Hopkins say? This is so because extensive teaching of the selflessness of phenomena through limitless forms of reasoning is solely for trainees of the Mahayana. And in Nagarjuna's treatise on the middle way, such extensive teaching is given. So although fundamental wisdom doesn't explain the Mahayana, the vast part of the Mahayana in terms of these various practices of the Bodhisattvas, like say in the Sangha's teachings, there was so much explanation, details of how the Bodhisattvas practice their, how they receive precepts from the guru, how you rely on the spiritual friend, the Mahayana spiritual friend, how you practice all of these perfections and so forth. So they were not mentioned, the vast aspect, those vast aspects were not mentioned in fundamental wisdom, but the fundamental wisdom did talk about extensive reasonings to explain emptiness, which is a hallmark of the Mahayana. So what does that mean? I mentioned that in some of the other courses. Generally, Hinayana practitioners can realize emptiness or are presented with emptiness, even in the Hinayana scriptures, with very, very brief allusions to emptiness, not extensive reasonings. For them, just to realize the emptiness of the person is enough, because their goal is to achieve nirvana in one life or maybe the next life, or at the most within 16 lifetimes, generally within the Hinayana path. So they don't need to stay around for a long time. They don't need extensive reasonings about emptiness. Whereas bodhisattvas, who may remain practicing the bodhisattva path for 3 countless great eons, boy, in that time, they need to have extensive reasonings to establish emptiness, the emptiness of coming and going, the emptiness of rebirth, the emptiness of the Four Noble Truths, because they will encounter many, many obstacles along the path if they don't have the wisdom of emptiness that applies to all those things over 3 countless great eons. So here the text says, this is because the extensive presentation of the selflessness of phenomena, not just the selflessness of persons, by a profuse variety of reasoning is done only in the Mahayana training. So it's only in the Mahayana scriptures, the Mahayana teachings for the Bodhisattvas, that extensive reasonings are given for emptiness. The Hinayana practitioners, although they do realize emptiness of phenomena, they don't have extensive reasonings for that because their goal will be attained in either this life, the next life, the third life, or up within 16 lifetimes. Beyond that, it's why is that? Why is that only that short period of time? Generally, one of the hallmarks of the Hinayana path is renunciation, right? One has to give up, in a sense, one's enjoyment of phenomena, enjoyment of food, sexual gratification, power, money, wealth, and so forth. That is very difficult to sustain for a long period of time, right? They take as their main object of abandonment attachment. They abandon attachment in all its various forms. And that's very difficult to sustain for a long time. Whereas in the Mahayana, the main object that is being, let's say, subjugated or, pushed aside is one's angered repulsion, one's anger and so forth. One tries to cultivate love and compassion in the Mahayana. So for them, for the Mahayana, the main object that is being, subjugated is one's irritation. One tries to be loving and compassionate. That is amenable to a long period of time in cyclic existence. The Bodhisattvas don't put as their primary aim at the beginning the elimination of attachment, although they definitely abandon attachment. They have that as their aim. And as you can see, the Mahayana monastics, like say Lama Zopa Rinpoche and His Holiness the Dalai Lama, take the aspect of also following that Hinayana practice of separating themselves from attachment, right? Yet the Mahayana, in the Mahayana, the main thing that is paramount in trying to separate from is anger, which is the antithesis of love and compassion. So here the text said, this is because the extensive presentation of the selflessness of phenomena by profuse variety of reasoning is done only in the Mahayana. And this is how the presentation is made in the fundamental wisdom. So fundamental wisdom does enter into the vast side or the extensive side from the point of view that it presents Mahayana, extensive reasonings about the selflessness of phenomena. Let me check with you. How is this doing? Tendran, what do you think? Is it making sense? You have to unmute. I can't hear you.
Yes, it's making sense. I missed, did you say what the main object for self-realizers is?
The main object of
Overcoming,
overcoming. Well, they would be generally within the Hinayana. Their main thing is to subjugate attachment.
Okay, just checking.
They use more reasonings, and they have to abide within cyclic existence longer than the hearers, the Shravakas, the solitary realizers do. They might remain in cyclic existence for as long as 100 eons. Nowhere near, those are just regular eons, not like the countless great eons, countless great eons that the Bodhisattvas accumulate merit and wisdom over. Some of you are familiar maybe with the text, the confession, the 35 Buddha confession. Some of you heard of that? Some nods, some no. Don, have you heard of the Confession Sutra? Actually, that is called, it's actually a segment of of a sutra called the Sutra of the Three Heaps. And in that, it's part of even a larger sutra. What is it, Paul? The Ratnakutra? Ratnakutra Sutra?
Yeah, Ratnakuta, yeah.
In that, there's one chapter requested was it by the practitioner of morality? I think it's the barber who had been one of the disciples of the Buddha.
The Upali Paripracha.
Upali Paripracha. So Upali was the foremost of the Buddha's Hinayana disciples in discipline. He was the one, there is like Shariputra was the foremost of Buddha's disciples, Hinayana disciples in wisdom. That's why he was the protagonist in the Heart Sutra asking Maitreya, how did the Bodhisattvas practice wisdom? Shariputra was the best in the foremost in the Hinayana disciples of wisdom. So he was asking Maitreya, hey, I know how we Shravakas practice wisdom, but how did the Bodhisattvas practice wisdom? The segment in the Heart Sutra. So in another occasion, in the Ratnakutra Sutra, Upali, who was foremost in ethics or morality, asks the Buddha, how do the Bodhisattvas purify their Bodhisattva infractions? I know how we Shravakas purify the Shravaka infractions. And the Buddha explained that the Bodhisattvas, among other things, such as this, he said that they recite this kind of prayer that is oftentimes we call the Confession to the 35 Buddhas, to purify the infractions of having broken the Bodhisattva vows. The implication of that is that it fits into the same category that the Hinayana practitioners, they have to achieve their goal, their bodhi, B-O-D-H-I, that means their enlightenment, their goal, their nirvana, within 1 to 16 lifetimes. They can't prolong that for a long time. Anyway, I'll talk more about that when we get into the chapter about ethics in the Bodhisattva, in the Madhyamaka Vatara. The commentary, that means the Madhyamaka Vatara commentary, the Bhasham, auto commentary by Chandrakirti, makes this point very clearly, that it presents Mahayana is indeed correct. Fundamental wisdom does present Mahayana, for it does so to elucidate the selflessness of phenomena. And the intention of Nagarjuna is to explain such selflessness in an extensive manner. In the Shravaka vehicle, the hearer's vehicle, the selflessness of phenomena is confined to brief illustrations. So that note, well, that note just points to the commentary. Doesn't say the exact thing. So in Jeffrey's text, he says, this is so because extensive teaching of the selflessness of phenomena through limitless forms of reasoning is solely for Mahayana trainees. And in Nagarjuna's treatise on the middle way, such extensive teachings is given. Chandrakirti says this very clearly in his own commentary to his supplement. That means so Chandrakirti wrote the root verses, the karikas, and he wrote a commentary to those called the Bhasham, the Madhyamaka Vatara Bhasham, the auto commentary. he says in that auto commentary, it is correct that the Mahayana was taught for the sake of clarifying the selflessness of phenomena, because Buddha wished to give an extensive teaching of the selflessness of phenomena. In the hearer vehicle, the selflessness of phenomena is illustrated only briefly. I will explain this later. Where are we here? Did I miss? Oops. I've lost where I was in the.
Jimba's text, it's page 34.
Oh, yeah. It says, I will, I'm using electronic version, so the page number won't do, because in the electronic version that I have, the ebook version, if you change the font size, the page numbers change. So I was looking for this verse. I will explore this point further in another section below. So that's Jason Khapa saying, I will explain this later. So that will be coming at another point. When we talk about scriptural citations from Hinayana scriptures, Sravika and Pratika Buddha scriptures, that talk about emptiness, how they allude to emptiness in very short forms, but they do allude specifically to the emptiness of phenomena. Thus, the path presented in Nagarjuna's text should ideally be complemented with the other dimensions of the Mahayana path as found in other instructions of Noble or Nagarjuna. Complemented or supplemented. For this reason, Chandrakirti presents these supplements in his work. He talks about the three factors of the ground of ordinary beings. So Jeffrey Coppins translates it this way. Thus, Chandrakirti thought that it would be very good to fill in the gaps, to complement the fundamental wisdom, fill in the gaps in the paths explained in the treatise and the middle way, the fundamental wisdom, supplying the other Mahayana paths of vastness by way of the quintessential instructions of Nagarjuna, superior Nagarjuna, as found in his precious garland, the Ratnavali, and from another text by Nagarjuna called the Sutra Samuchaya. Have you heard of Sutra Samuchaya? No? Let me see, who's the other? Palmo, have you heard of Sutra Samuchaya? Palmo's not with us.
No, I'm here. No.
So
if I did, my memory is kind of bad, and so I don't remember.
Oh, okay. So Samuchaya, some of you may remember from our other courses, Samuchaya means compendium. Like when we talk about the Abhidharma Samuchaya, text written by a Sangha on Abhidharma, so compendium of Abhidharma. So Sutra Samuchaya was a text comprised by Nagarjuna, in which he gave a list, sort of a compendium, a summary of various quotations from Mahayana sutras, which were the basis for his explanation, Nagarjuna's explanation about the Mahayana. So it's a very important text. I'm not sure, Paul, do you know, is there translation of Sutra Samuchaya, Nagarjuna Sutra Samuchaya?
I don't know. There may be. It might be one of those texts that has a short version and a long version with commentary. I would have to check.
Yeah.
I'll check and get back to you.
Yeah. So Sutra Samuchaya is Nagarjuna's text that talks about quotations from the Mahayana compendium of them. Shantideva wrote his Bodhisattva Charyavatara, you know about the Bodhisattva practices. His other important text was called something Samuchaya. What is it called?
The Shiksha Samuchaya.
Shiksha, a compendium of trainings. So they're sort of similar. Nagarjuna's text, Sutra Samuchaya, gives all sorts of verses and sources for the Mahayana teachings from the sutras. Siksha Samuchaya is kind of like a basis for the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, giving the quotations from the sutras of the Bodhisattvas practices that you find within the various chapters of the Bodhisattva Charyavatara. So here it says, I'm reading Jeffrey's translation here. Thus, Chandrakirti thought that it would be very good to fill in the gaps in the paths explained in Fundamental Wisdom, the Treatise on the Middle Way, supplying the other Mahayana paths of vastness, extensive path, by way of the quintessential instructions from Arya Nagarjuna as found in the Precious Garland and the Compendium of Sutra. In order to fill these gaps, Chandrakirti set forth the 3 practices done on the level of a common being, the 10 grounds of a learner superior, the resultant ground or effect ground, and the cultivation of special insight through the steps of the 5th and 6th grounds. So in our text, it says, in Jimpa's translation, it says, for this reason, Chandrakirti presents these supplements in his work, the 3 factors of the ground of ordinary beings. Do you know what that means? Anyone have an idea? Paul will know, but Rachel, do you know?
I don't, I'm guessing body, speech, and mind.
No, a good guess. It means what are we calling here? The 3 factors of the ground of ordinary beings. So that means the path of accumulation, the path of preparation, no, I don't think that's right. So I'll say, I was thinking it meant the 3 practices done on the level of a common being. Okay, I'll have to get back to that. I was thinking, obviously, when we talk about common beings, common beings means beings that are not Arya beings. So on that path, one has to develop renunciation, one has to develop bodhicitta, and one has to develop an insight into emptiness, even if you haven't realized it directly on the path of accumulation and the path of preparation. So I think it will probably explain here, or I will have to check what are the 3 factors of the ground of ordinary beings. Then once you achieve the path of seeing, the second point here, the 10 grounds of the Arya Bodhisattvas on the learner's stage. So learners, what that means is once you have achieved the path of seeing, you are a learner. Before that, you are an ordinary being. When it talked about the 3 factors on the ground of ordinary beings, then the 10 grounds of the Arya Bodhisattvas on the learner's stage. What's the when we talk about the 5 paths, we talk about the path of accumulation, the path of preparation, the path of seeing, the path of meditation, and the path of no more learning, right? Path of no more learning, the 5 paths means Buddhahood. It's sort of graduation. You don't have to learn anything anymore. Path of no more learning. The path of seeing and the path of meditation are called the 10 grounds of the Arya Bodhisattvas on the learner's stage. They are still learning. Path of no more learning is Buddhahood. The path of seeing, when you achieve the first bhumi, and the path of meditation, when you achieve all the rest of the 10 bhumis. Those are called learners, the stage of the learners, the bhumis of the Bodhisattvas. So he supplements in his work the 3 factors of the ground of ordinary beings, the 10 grounds of the Arya Bodhisattvas on the learner stage, the resultant ground, meaning the path of no more learning, the state of Buddhahood, on the basis of explaining the sequence of the 5th and 6th grounds, the cultivation of penetrative insight grounded in tranquil abiding, which is the essence of meditative absorption, probing the suchness of the two selflessnesses. So generally, when we talk about penetrative insight, we talk about that as being on the 6th bhumi. Penetrative insight is vipassana, right? On the 5th bhumi, there's a special practice of dhyana, which is variously translated as concentration or meditation. On both of those bhumis, the 5th and 6th grounds, where you have a special practice of concentration and a special practice in wisdom. When it says, on the basis of explaining the sequence of the 5th and 6th grounds. So on the 5th ground, you have a concentration, a special practice of concentration, but you are actually realizing emptiness, but not necessarily directly by means of mental image. On the 6th ground, you have a special practice in wisdom, the practice of wisdom, the cultivation of penetrative insight, vipassana, grounded in tranquil abiding, shamatha, which is the essence of meditative absorption, probing the suchness of the 2 selflessnesses, selflessness of persons and the selflessness of phenomena. Therefore, when contemplating the meaning of fundamental wisdom, you must do so by bringing to mind these aforementioned points taught in entering the middle way. So these are other ways that Chandrakirti is supplementing fundamental wisdom by bringing in details of the 3 factors of the ground of ordinary beings. I think now that I'm thinking of it, I think it must mean these 3 factors of what do we say? A great compassion, non-dual awareness, and bodhicitta. I think that's probably what's being referred to here. That will come quite soon. The 3 factors of the ground of ordinary beings: great compassion, non-dual awareness, meaning realization, understanding of emptiness, and bodhicitta. The 10 grounds of the Arya Bodhisattva on the learner's stage. So that's not mentioned in detail in fundamental wisdom. The resultant ground of Buddhahood is not mentioned in fundamental wisdom in any extensive way. And the sequence of the 5th and 6th grounds the cultivation of penetrative insight grounded in tranquil abiding is not mentioned in fundamental wisdom. So these are ways that Madhyamaka Vatara supplements or enters into fundamental wisdom. Otherwise,
Venerable,
yes.
I have a question. So
Yeah.
did you say that in the sixth ground, the practice of wisdom, so the main practices of wisdom to realize emptiness, at least through meaning generality, right? Is that what you said?
Say that again.
So on the sixth ground, the practice of wisdom, the special practice, or you're concentrating on having a realization of emptiness, at least indirectly. Is that what you said?
No. If I said that, I misspoke. One from the first bhumi, one
Right,
has a direct realization of emptiness.
That's what I thought. Right. Okay.
But on the fifth bhumi, you have a special practice of the perfection of concentration. So in that sense, you are specializing, you are enhancing your understanding of emptiness through concentration or meditation, through dhyana. On the sixth ground, you have a special practice of the practice of wisdom. Okay, so I may have misspoke at that point. Otherwise, the two aims of, I'm reading from the text again. Otherwise, the two aims of composing the Madhyamaka Vatara, entering into the middle way, will have been lost if you don't realize that these are the ways that the Madhyamaka Vatara supplements fundamental wisdom. So it supplements the fundamental wisdom in terms of the profound, and it supplements the fundamental wisdom in terms of the vast. The second manner of entering the middle way by way of this text then is by entering the path of fundamental wisdom from the perspective of the vast aspect of the path. Okay. So this may seem, in the Madhyamaka Vatara, these points are not mentioned in detail. This is Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary on the Madhyamaka Vatara, when he's explaining how the Madhyamaka Vatara supplements or enters into the middle way by means of the vast and by means of the profound and the vast. So then we get to the translator's homage. And this says, I pay homage to the gentle Lord Manjushri. So who is the translator that's being talked about here? Anyone have an idea? It says the translator's homage. Who is translating what?
I think this must be Chandrakirti, right? I mean,
Is he translating someone?
Well,
So go on.
Well, no, I mean, he's giving a commentary on the Madhyamaka Avatara. No, the Madhyamaka Avatara is a commentary on the fundamental wisdom.
Is it Nagarjuna? Nagarjuna?
But he's
No.
not translating either, right?
Okay, so Nagarjuna text was written in Sanskrit. Nagarjuna's text, fundamental wisdom. Chandrakirti's text was written in Sanskrit. The
Lama
Madhyamaka
Tsongkhapa was Tibetan.
Pardon?
Lama
Thank
Tsongkhapa was Tibetan, so he would be the translator.
No.
No?
Good try. So Chandrakirti's text, which was in Sanskrit, was translated into Tibetan by various translators over the years. There were 2 or possibly 3 translators that came out with editions in Tibetan of Madhyamaka Vatara. So those translators, at the beginning of their translation of Madhyamaka Vatara, they wrote a homage, which was the tradition, in order to create karma to be successful in their translation. Don, what do you think? You have your hand up. It's that little hand is a good icon to put up there. Yeah? If you unmute, we can't hear you. You have to unmute. Don, there's a button you have to press there. There you go. Oh, you're muted. There you go.
Okay. I want to go back to those 3 factors of ordinary human beings, ordinary beings.
Yeah.
Be that it's the first factor is just prior to the path of accumulation, where we develop uncontrived a bodhicitta or an inferential understanding or renunciation, then the path of accumulation and the path of preparation. Those are the 3 factors of ordinary human beings.
Are you stating that as a
question?
As a question. I think, I was unclear when I said it first. I was thinking there were 3 paths of the ordinary beings, but I think what this is referring to is what will come when we talk about praising compassion at the beginning. Chandrakirti himself, when he begins his text, right now we were just talking about the translator's homage. The translator was translating Chandrakirti's text. So right at the beginning, they paid homage to Manjushri, and we'll explain that in a second. When Chandrakirti begins his text, he pays homage to great compassion, as opposed to the hearers and solitary realizers, Buddhists and other things. So in that context, it's explained that the 3 factors that are causes of bodhisattvas are what do we say? Great compassion, non-dual awareness, and bodhicitta. You might think, when you talk about bodhisattva, you already have bodhicitta. So that discussion we'll have to leave for that section. I think that's what's being meant here by the 3 factors of the ground of ordinary beings. In neither Jimpa's text nor Jeffrey Hopkins' text is there any kind of footnote or explanation about what's meant there, the 3 factors of the ground of ordinary beings. You might think it means, well, Paul, go on.
Yes, George, it comes up a few pages later in Jimba's translation on page 43. He says exactly as you just stated, understanding these 3 factors, and then he brackets in compassion, non-dual awareness, and he calls it awakening mind, but obviously bodhicitta, and then gives a quote from the Precious Garland.
Right. So the supposition is that means the 3 factors on the ground of ordinary beings. When that is first mentioned in Jimpa's translation that we have here, and in Jeffrey Hopkins' translation, neither of them explain what are meant by those 3. But I think it's referring to those 3 that are mentioned a little bit later: compassion, non-dual awareness, and bodhicitta. Okay, so let's just continue on a little bit further. Translator's homage. So this is the translator which would have translated the Sanskrit version of Chandrakirti's of the verses. Someone else translated the commentary. There was someone who translated both together. Then there was another translator later. So in any case, I think all of them had the same homage. I pay homage to Jimpa says, gentle Lord Manjushri. Jeffrey translates the youthful Manjushri, Shunagyopa. So they're probably just different ways of translating the same Tibetan. So here it says, the meaning of these words is easy to understand. Given that this text presents the ultimate Abhidharma, and because it principally pertains to the training and wisdom, here the translator pays homage to Manjushri in accord with the time-honored decree. So what is this talking about? The verse, note 57 says, this is a reference to a royal decree proclaimed during the 8th century, whereby to help immediately identify which of the three baskets, the Tripitaka, the Vinaya Pitaka, the basket of discipline, the Sutra Pitaka, or the Abhidharma Pitaka, the basket of higher knowledge, to immediately identify a given text might belong to which of those. Different objects of homage were chosen by the translators. Well, it's not so much chosen as the king decreed. There was a committee that came about, and the king made this proclamation that in any text that was in the Vinaya Pitaka, in the basket of the teachings of the Buddha on discipline, the homage had to be homage to the omniscient one. On the Sutra Pitaka, it was homage to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. On the Abhidharma Pitaka, the homage had to be to Manjushri. So just from the very beginning, you would know what subject matter was. So that's kind of interesting. It's kind of like, having from the very beginning, a little synopsis at the beginning telling you what the text is going to be explaining about. In the case of a Vinaya text, the omniscient one is chosen as the object of homage. Not so much chosen, it was dictated. For a text pertaining to Sutra, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and finally, for an Abhidharma text, homage is paid to Manjushri. The three baskets were in turn correlated to the three higher trainings. So the Vinaya Pitaka, so all of the Buddha's teachings could be put into three baskets. Some people interpret that as once they had been written down in the Pali Canon, the actual things that were written would be put into various baskets, or you could just meet it more metaphorically. All of the teachings of the Buddha could be indicated, sort of summarized into three categories. Those about discipline, Vinaya, those about essentially concentration, the sutras, and that about higher wisdom, Abhidharma. So these were correlated to the three higher trainings. So the higher training in morality for Vinaya, the concentration for the sutra basket, and wisdom for Abhidharma. So when we talk about the three higher trainings, we talk about the higher training in morality or ethics or what do we say? Morality. So that is all of those intricate teachings about morality can be found in the Vinaya Pitaka, in the basket of the teachings on discipline, where the Buddha taught about the rules of the monks and nuns, the teachings on the lay vows and so forth. When in the Sutra Pitaka were all of the teachings, especially about wisdom, about concentrations, with a higher training of concentration, dhyana, and the Abhidharma Pitaka was the higher training, explained about the higher training of wisdom. So it says the words, the meaning of these words is easy to understand. So then the text begins, the meaning of the treatise itself. Earlier we talked about the various sections of the text. Now the meaning of the treatise itself. This has 4 sections. The salutation, a means of entering into the task of composing the treatise. The actual body of the treatise. And the manner in 3, the manner in which the treatise is composed, was composed. That comes at the end of the text. And dedicating the merits of having composed the treatise. So unfortunately, I have to take one moment more here to just empty my bladder. I'm on my 6th course of antibiotics for urinary tract infection, and I'm not going to be able to sustain a couple of minutes more. So I'm just going to stop for a second. I'll be right back. Thank you for your patience. I'm back with you. So when we say the meaning of the treatise itself, there at the beginning, there is, let me see how Jeffrey translates it here. Jeffrey translates salutation, rather he says expression of worship, a means of beginning to compose the text. Our text says salutation, a means of entering into the task of composing the treatise. So that what that means is at the beginning, Chandrakirti pays homage or expression of worship to compassion, to great compassion. And this is a way of beginning to compose the text. So that's what we're going to be talking about next time. So we're going to end right there with the class. We're going to do some dedication prayers. And then I will just allow people that have other obligations that don't want to remain to leave. But those of you who want to remain, I will remain for another 15 or 20 minutes or more to answer any questions that you have or any comments or clarifications you might like to make. So Sheila, could you put up the dedication prayers? Okay. Keep on moving around there. So I think just go a little below that. Okay, dedication prayers. There we go. So think that during this time, we've created some virtuous karma, some virtues, and that these will definitely ripen within cyclic existence. So what the dedication prayer is to try to, the act of dedication at the end is to try to link up the virtues that we've created by means of an aspiration that they ripen in a particular way, so that they don't just aimlessly ripen in something pleasant in the future that might actually be an obstacle to our path, but that they might ripen in a way that will lead us continually to the state of Buddhahood. So we say, due to the merits of these virtues, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all migrators without exception into that enlightened state. That's the general kind of dedication. So think in whatever way these virtues might ripen in the future, may they become the cause of my continued spiritual development from life to life, up to and including the state of a omniscient Buddha, a Guru Buddha, from which I can spontaneously, effortlessly, and perfectly lead all sentient beings into that very same state. Then a prayer for bodhicitta. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, may it not decrease, but increase more and more. And then long life prayer for Lama Sopa Rinpoche. You who uphold the Muni's moral code, the Muni meaning Shakyamuni, serving as the bountiful bearer of all, sustaining, preserving, and spreading Manjunath's victorious doctrine. Manjunath refers to the teacher Manjushri, masterfully accomplishing the magnificent prayers honoring the three jewels. Savior of myself and others, your disciples, please, Lama Zopa, live long. And then to all of the spiritual guides, you are eyes viewing all the infinite scriptures, supreme gateways for the fortunate traveling to liberation, engaging with skillful means, moved by love, all illuminating spiritual friends, please live a long and stable life. So those of you who have other activities to get off to, feel free to leave. Those of you who remain, I will be here, and you can either raise your hand or put that little icon, little hand icon up in the corner. Ah, okay, Rachel immediately has her hand up.
Yes.
Rachel, what do you think?
Please, George Lau, please live a long and stable, healthy life and continue to teach us the entire text that you're intending.
Oh, okay, that's auspicious, okay.
Rachel, you beat me to it. I was going to say the same thing.
I'll try. I'm beginning to feel I don't have much time left the way things are going. I had Lyme disease, and then I had, what is that, lymphocytic colitis, then passed a kidney stone, and now am fighting prostate cancer. I had 45 days of radiation and recovering from that. Venerable Roger said that Lama Zopa said that because all of this occurred after my 3-year retreat. Lama Zopa said, oh, it must have been a good retreat. And so much negative karma is purifying. So you might think, oh, I don't want to do a 3-year retreat if I'm going to have to experience everything that George experienced. But I think it's is actually a good sign. Hopefully some negative karma has been purified. So Sean, you have your hand up. You have a question.
Yeah, I was wondering, since the Prasangika Madhyamaka is considered a Buddhist philosophy, is there certain assumptions that are being made up front that have to be understood in order to grasp this properly?
So what had you said? Had you say Prasangika or Svatandrika Madhyamaka? What did you say?
Prasangika.
Oh, Prasangika. So the Prasangika Madhyamaka is a philosophical school. You could say that is one of the philosophical views. And you said, are there some assumptions?
Well, like most philosophical arguments, you kind of upfront present the assumptions that are made. Because I've read further than we've gone, and
good for you.
I just feel like there's definitely some things that are. Seems like you would have to, that there's things that I don't know how you would ever demonstrate any of this stuff. So,
so yeah, I know you had some questions before about, whether reincarnation exists and so forth and so on. So,
well, I've even heard Buddhist people that were familiar with the Pali text or whatever saying that, like, reincarnation wasn't even mentioned in the early Pali text. So
okay, that's completely wrong.
Well, I'm not a scholar in these things. So
yeah, if you talk to if you read the Pali Canon, and if you talk to practitioners nowadays in the Hinayana, what we call the Theravada tradition, right? In Sri Lanka, in Burma, in Thailand, and you talk to those monks and practitioners who have tried to express that into English, that are based on the teachings of the Theravada, they say without exception that the reincarnation and karma are hallmarks of the Theravada path. Many of the Theravada monks, Western born, who have studied with the Theravada masters, have read those texts, say without exception that the aim of the Theravada is to achieve nirvana in this or the next life or the life after that, up to 16 lives from now. So that completely implicit in that is the acceptance of reincarnation. It's only some modern, American or Swiss or some other people who have heard some teachings and they want to explain it in such a way that's palatable for Westerners that sort of discard the teachings about reincarnation and karma and so forth. There was a great debate some years ago that was, I think it was written up in where Paul Tricycle or someplace, a debate between Robert Thurman and Steve Batchelor. Steve Batchelor had been a Buddhist monk with Geshe Rapton, had then become left that and became a monk in the Korean Zen tradition, and then left that and began to promote Buddhism in the West. And some of his books seem to indicate that Buddhists didn't have to believe in reincarnation and karma and so forth. And Robert Thurman, in a debate with him that was in one of the issues of Tricycle magazine, I think, explained how they debated against one another, and Robert Thurman said this is completely baloney, whatever you want to say, that the Bodhisattva path presupposes remaining in cyclic existence for numberless lifetimes in the future. Well, maybe up to 3 countless great eons. So certainly, the necessity of accepting the existence of reincarnation. So these are things, and that the events that we experience now are the result of actions that we have created in the past. Maybe some of the actions that we've created now, some of the actions we create now won't be experienced, the results of those actions won't be experienced until future lives, but that karma is an inherent part of the Buddhist teachings. So certainly, when you talked about what are the assumptions of the Prasangika, those are not just the assumptions of the Prasangika, those are the assumptions of the Buddhist path in general. All of the paths, the Shravaka, Pratika Buddha, Bodhisattva paths, all of the teachings of the Buddha. The Buddha talked in his Jataka tales about his past lives, talking about reincarnation and about karma, the results of the actions that were done in previous lives, how they're experienced now. So all of that is a priori assumption of the Prasangika, and the Prasangika accepts other kinds of things also as presented by the Buddha, but always tracing them back to statements that the Buddha made in the sutras. So this text that we talked about before by Nagarjuna, called the Sutra Samuchaya, the compendium of sutra, there are passages there drawn from various sutras that Nagarjuna points to explain the basis for the Prasangika path. Okay, so I'm going to leave that there. Donnie, you have a question. You have your white hand up there. You disappeared.
She stopped her video instead of.
Yeah. You have to. Okay.
No, I didn't. Okay, I'm back to the three ordinary people. I think I may have found it in Precious Garland, the translation by Hopkins, but I'm not sure what your original quote was, and I can't find it because my eyes are too blurry.
Okay, no.
What was that one that was in question?
In the Precious Garland, there's a quote that we will be talking about in the next class, in the class after that, and in when Chandrakirti is talking about compassion, it is the main cause, the initial main cause. I just muted myself. Chandrakirti himself says compassion is the initial main cause of the Bodhisattvas. So what that means is there are three causes of the Bodhisattvas: compassion itself, or you could say great compassion; non-dual awareness, which means understanding of emptiness. So non-duality here doesn't mean there are many.
I was asking. That's not what I was asking.
Okay.
That's not what I was asking. I know that. I was wondering earlier in the class today, there was a question about what was meant by a certain line in our text. It was about the ordinary being. And I'm wondering what page that was on, or I can't find it in the book.
Okay. So it is.
That one guy said that it comes up a little later.
Yeah, I'm trying to find for you. So it's talking about the same, it's talking about the same thing that I'm talking about right now, Donnie. But it's when we talked about the 3 practices of beings on the 3 factors of the ground of ordinary beings. Is that page 34?
Yeah.
That's the first occurrence, George.
Okay.
And And then the subsequent
34. Okay,
explanation.
that's all I wanted to know. I found it in Fresh and Starland. I found
Okay.
it. I found it. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you. Good. Okay. So what I was just trying to expound upon that will be explained in more detail in the expression of worship, or the salutation by Chandrakirti at the beginning. He pays homage to great compassion. So usually, when people pay homage at the beginning of texts, they pay, before the Tibetan translators, this tradition of paying homage to Manjushri for Abhidharma text, translation of Abhidharma text, paying homage to the omniscient one, the Buddha, for the Vinaya, and the tradition of paying homage to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas for the translations of the Sutra Pitaka. That was a Tibetan tradition. Chandrakirti was way before that. So the tradition was you could pay homage at the beginning of your text to any noble beings that were relevant. So many times there was homage when people comprised text. This is not talking about the Buddha. This is other people that wrote texts about Buddhism in earlier days. They would pay homage to the hearers or solitary realizers, or the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, or to Chenrezig, or to Tara, or someone like this, depending on the subject matter. But instead of those things, sort of higher beings and things like this, omniscient one, Chandrakirti pays homage to great compassion. So there's a great importance in that, because Lama Yeshe used to say, when we put our hands together, when you make prostration, the tradition is that your thumbs are tucked in, right? And you put your hands together, and those two thumbs, one on top of the other, represent the jewel. When we say, like, Om Mani Padme Hum, right? The jewel of bodhicitta. Lama Yeshe used to say, when he put his hands at his heart like that, and to other people, it wasn't like they were higher beings than him. He was recognizing their Buddha nature, and paying homage to that. So, in the sense that their Buddha nature is a precursor of their eventual achievement of enlightenment. It's like sort of like a distant cause of their future enlightenment. So paying homage to that, Lama used to say that in India, one didn't pay homage to the full moon. One paid homage to the new moon. The first day when there's a little crescent, you get excited. You say, oh, wow, because you know that eventually it will become a full moon. So in this way, when you pay homage to the first cause of enlightenment, great compassion, the cause of the Bodhisattvas and the Buddhas and so forth. So in the same way of paying homage to Buddha nature and so forth, because they are the elements that will give rise to eventually the state of enlightenment. Okay. So, anyone else have? Oh, Ida. Hi, Ida.
Thank you, Venerable, for the teachings.
Yeah.
Perhaps you could help me clarify this. Are there 3 vehicles or 1 vehicle? We hear about the Shravaka's vehicle and the Pratyeka Buddha's vehicle and the Buddha's vehicle. Is it
Right.
1 vehicle or 3?
Okay. So big debate. We do talk about temporary vehicles, the Shravaka vehicle, the Pratyeka Buddha vehicle, and the Bodhisattva vehicle. Okay. In some of the lower philosophical schools, like the Sautrantika, even amongst the Madhyamaka, some of the Madhyamaka schools say that there are definite vehicles that one will remain in until one reaches one's goal. From the Prasangika point of view, there is the idea of ekayana. Yana means vehicle, right? Like Mahayana, Shravaka Yana. Yana means vehicle, like a cart that you would get into. The Mahayana is called a vehicle because it can get you to the great destination, Maha, the Maha destination. And it's also called a great vehicle because it's like a big vehicle, brings all beings to that state, right? I think you may have heard me tell the story once when I was teaching here in Asheville, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. And one lady had been appointed to be my driver. And she had the car that she had was an old Cadillac hearse. She was a florist, and she would, she could deliver the flowers in this hearse. So when I first came, I looked at the car and I said, wow, this is interesting. She said, I call it the Mahayana, the great vehicle. It was big, you could take lots of stuff in it. So from the Prasangika point of view, there is one final vehicle. We all, even if you are temporarily in the Shravaka vehicle, that will bring you to the Sravika Nirvana. Once you achieve that state, your mind does not cease to exist. Your mind will continue, even though it's meditating in single-pointed concentration on emptiness, it will continue until at a certain point when the karma to sustain that concentration begins to subside, the Buddhas will awaken that Shravaka Arhat, in that they've achieved nirvana, right? Awaken them and inform them that they have not eliminated all of the faults of the mind, and will encourage them to enter into rebirth again, not through the usual means of uncontrolled karma, but by them motivating to ripen seeds of karma in their mind stream that have not yet ripened, to take rebirth in cyclic existence, to follow the Bodhisattva path. It might take them, even though they've realized emptiness already, they have not accumulated the collection of wisdom. I'm sorry, they have not accumulated the collection of merit, which is necessary to achieve omniscience. It's necessary, besides wisdom, it's necessary to collect merit because merit is a cooperative cause to eliminate the obstructions to omniscience. It's not enough just to have wisdom, the wisdom that realizes emptiness. You also have to have bodhicitta, where your mind is as though the winds that are the mount of mind spreads throughout space toward all sentient beings, kind of as a precursor to achieving enlightenment. You have to have that bodhicitta that thinks of the welfare of all sentient beings and accumulates merit for the achievement of enlightenment. And in that way, you can eventually eliminate the finest obstructions to omniscience. So from the Prasangika point of view, there is one yana, ekayana. We're all going to the same destination. I remember when I complained about one monk at Manjushri Institute many years ago, so-and-so is this and this. And Lama said, we're all, we're all going to the same destination, dear. Whether, even people that we find tiresome, even some political person that we might find totally odious, is the object of our compassion, and they themselves will eventually become Buddha, even though it's hard to imagine right now.
I understand now. So eventually all hearers and all solitary realizers will become Buddhas.
Yes.
They won't stay in that state.
They won't stay in that state. They will, there are individuals who are of definite lineage of Shravakas, so that they will definitely achieve the Shravaka Nirvana or Arhatship. It's called actually Shravaka enlightenment. So there was many years ago, one of the teachers in New Delhi, Dobum Tuku, wrote an article in one of the Buddhist journals about the three enlightenments. Usually when we think about enlightenment, we think of enlightenment meaning like the enlightenment of a Buddha. But in the text, the Buddha actually referred to the hearer's enlightenment, Shravaka Bodhi, and the Pratyeka Buddha Bodhi. That didn't mean full Samyak Sam Bodhi. Samyak Sam means fully qualified, the actual Bodhi of a Buddha. It's not Samyak Sam Bodhi, it's like the Shravaka Bodhi. So they will achieve their own end state. And upon achieving that, their mind does not disappear, does not cease. It remains until it is awakened through the power of the Buddha. And they are instructed how to take rebirth in cyclic existence again, not through the ordinary contaminated karma, but by making prayers to ripen their karmic seeds to take rebirth as humans generally, following the Bodhisattva path, and they eventually will achieve Buddhahood.
Thank you so much, Venerable.
Yeah, sure. So, someone else have a question? I wanted to mention one thing. Last time, Snehi, Sister Snehi, I think she's off in Minneapolis this weekend on a Buddhist retreat. Maybe, I'm not sure how long. She had asked about when you meditate on emptiness, she was having difficulty, what appeared to the mind? Remember that question, some of you who were there? Brother Shanka had mentioned some example that he recalled Venerable Renee giving about, and correct me if I'm not saying it, expressing it directly, that like coming out from the shopping center, going to the place where you think your car was and not seeing your car there. And then the realization, what was the realization, Shanka?
Well, what he said was that it's not that you see the presence of something, or rather what you see is just no car. You don't see parking space, or you don't see anything else. You just, for a split second, you just see no car.
Yeah, okay. So that is from the Prasangika point of view, is not perhaps not applicable in this explanation when we talk about what is perceived. When you have the realization of emptiness, you apply the four essential points, recognizing the object of negation, ascertaining the pervasion that if it did exist, is inherently existent. It would have to be inherently one with the aggregates or inherently different than the aggregates, talking about the realization of the emptiness of the person. And then applying, it's not inherently one with the aggregates and not inherently different with the aggregates. At that point, once all of that gels, when that logic gels in one's mind, the previously appearing inherently existent self is recognized not to exist at all. So there's a very famous saying in the sutras and in the tantras: the best seeing is no seeing. So when we're talking about seeing emptiness, you're not seeing it with your eyes, right? We're talking about with your physical eyes. We're talking about seeing in a metaphorical sense with the eye of prajna and the eye of jnana, or the eye of of gnosis and the eye of wisdom and the eye of gnosis, two forms of wisdom, one higher than the other. So emptiness is perceived by those eyes in the sense of not seeing the inherently existent object, the inherently existent self. So the example of coming out from the shopping center and seeing with your physical eyes a space where there's no car, there's a lot of philosophical sort of qualms with that. In the sense of the highest practice of Tantra, when we talk about the completion stage of Tantra, when you are, or even practicing before that, what we call the clear light of death. Have you heard of that, the clear light of death, you guys? So at the end of our life, when all of the energy currents within our body, the winds that support various consciousnesses, all of them absorb to the heart chakra. At that point, just before one leaves this life, there is the appearance to the mind of a vacuity that is called all empty. Sometimes people call it clear light, but clear light generally refers to the realization of emptiness. It's called we talk about the white appearance, the red increase, the black near attainment, and then all empty. They're called empty, I can't remember the names of the other empties. So the white,
the empty, something empty, great empty, and then all empty.
All empty, right? So all empty refers to that state. You are not realizing emptiness at that point. All that is appearing to the mind is a mere vacuity. The practitioner of highest yoga tantra tries to bring their realization of emptiness they have had earlier. They have to have realized emptiness before, to some degree, maybe not directly. They try to bring that realization through memory, through the various stages. When there is the dissolution of the earth element, they try to remember emptiness. When there's the dissolution of the water element, they try to remember the meaning of emptiness as the mind is becoming more and more subtle. When the fire element absorbs, they might meditate on the emptiness of the mind. When the air element absorbs, they may meditate on emptiness. And the white, red, and black appearances, various kinds of empty, they meditate on the meaning of emptiness. Then when the subtlemost mind appears, there's no longer the ability to analyze at that time, but by the force of their bringing that memory of the meaning of emptiness, sort of like seeing the empty space where the car was, right? They realize the car is not inherently existent. Here in the example that Renee gave, it's just like there's no car, but it's a little bit similar to that in the tantric sense. All empty, and then one through the force of one's habit, of one's familiarization of bringing the memory of emptiness to that point, it clicks at that point. This is the emptiness of all phenomena. One doesn't say that verbally or think that intellectually, just the realization of emptiness clicks in. That perhaps is a little more, related to that, that in the sense that there is empty, and then one realizes the meaning of emptiness. So I'm going to leave it there.
So Venerable, I just want to mention that, first of all, I don't want to put in Venerable Rene's mouth because it was a long time ago, and my recollection of exactly what he said, of course, it could be wrong too. So, yeah, but I mean, it was but I think he was just using it as an analogy, you know, because he was in a retreat and he was trying to explain what the sense is like, you know, like when you get that realization or whatever. So anyway.
Right. So the important thing to think of, to remember here is that this expression, the best seeing is no seeing. What that means is that to the eye of wisdom or the eye of gnosis, to your intellectual, to your mental consciousness, wisdom and higher wisdom, exalted wisdom, to the face of that, there is not the appearance of any inherent existence at all. That is considered to be seeing clear light. That is the actual clear light. So there's all empty, which could be called the mother clear light. But when you click into the realization that that is the meaning of emptiness, that's called the sun clear light. S-O-N, like the mother's sun, right? First, you have the appearance of empty, and then the recollection that has been cultivated through your practice of that again and again brings about the realization of emptiness. In one interview with the Dalai Lama, I don't know, it might have been BBC or something. You know how you have these people who stay with the Dalai Lama for a week and they go around with him and everything like that. You've seen these, right? They asked the Dalai Lama. At one point, the Dalai Lama was meditating in between prayers, and the reporter said, "Oh, what are you doing now? What are you doing?" The Dalai Lama said, "I'm rehearsing. I'm meditating on the process of death up until the clear light." So in that process, one does that again and again in the practice of Tantra. And the Dalai Lama says, "I do this 8 or 9 times a day." That's probably, he probably did even more times. All of the various sadhanas that you practice when you generate yourself as a deity, you go through that death evolution and you try to recall the meaning of emptiness in each step, whether it's merely on the level of imagination, or if you're practicing the completion stage, if you can actually withdraw the winds into the central channel, and these things are you actually have the appearance of smoke, a mirage and smoke and fireflies and the dying lamp and so forth, the white appearance, red increase, black near attainment. And all of those stages, once you've recognized that, part of your mind tries to recall the meaning of emptiness, so that when you reach the final stage of all empty, when all the airs have absorbed, there is the possibility of recalling the meaning of emptiness. Okay. So, should we leave it there? Someone note, please, where we got. I forgot exactly to say here. So we're just at the point, and I don't know the page because I'm using the ebook version here. It says that it presents Mahayana is indeed correct, for it does so to elucidate the selflessness of phenomena, and the intention of Nagarjuna is to explain such selflessness in an extensive manner. In the Sravika vehicle, the selflessness of phenomena is confined to only a brief illustration. That's where we stopped today. And
we went a little bit further. We went all the way to the salutation, a means of entering
the translator's
the text.
homage or the salutation, right? So, right. Thank you for reminding me. So we've got to the point of the translator's homage or salutation. I pay homage to the gentle Lord Manjushri, or as Jeffrey says, to the youthful Manjushri. Usually, Shunu Gyowa Jambel usually means the youthful Manjushri, because Manjushri is taking the aspect of this young prince, not so much the word gentle there. So thank you very much.
Oh, Venerable, would you mention, would you say how much, where to read forward to?
I would say generally to read from where we ended, and so we're just beginning with the translator's homage, to read 3 or 4 pages, as many as 5 pages ahead. Of course, some of you may go beyond that. But if you only read a couple of paragraphs after that, you may not. It's really good to have read the teachings beforehand. Geshe Chune, who's the teacher in Singapore, is also teaching right now this text, and Venerable Steve is translating for him. And I notice Geshe-la mentions every class, make sure that you read ahead, so that you're just not listening to what I say for the first time, that you've read it, you've thought about it, maybe you have some doubts. And then when the material is presented in class, it will make a little more sense to you. So read 3 or 4 pages, possibly 5 pages ahead for next time.